Do you think silence in a family says more than shouting?
I remember the exact moment I realized I was never the golden child, not in the bitter, sarcastic way people throw that phrase around, but in the cold, sobering, gut punch kind of way that leaves a mark you can't shake even years later. It wasn't some dramatic family fight or a holiday meltdown like you see in movies. No, it was much quieter than that. It happened on a Tuesday of all days, around 4:30 in the afternoon, when I was sitting at the kitchen table in my tiny one-bedroom rental, going through paperwork for the new place I'd been trying to lock down for months. It was my dream apartment, not extravagant or flashy, just mine. A small two-bedroom near the lake, with enough light to grow herbs in the windowsill, and just enough space to maybe adopt a dog if I could finally settle in. The landlord was old school, wanted a cosigner despite my solid income and excellent credit. I'd saved for years, budgeted like a maniac, even skipped vacations and borrowed dresses to attend friends' weddings. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for a signature. Just a signature. When I called my parents and asked them calmly, respectfully, like the adult they always expected me to be, they both paused like I'd asked them to sell their house and move to Bolivia. My dad cleared his throat, which he always did when he was about to say something he knew would sting, but wanted to dress it in faux wisdom. "Sweetheart," he said, "you know we raised you to be independent. You're not a kid anymore, and you're doing great. We just don't believe in enabling." My mother, always the echo chamber for his decisions when it came to me, chimed in, "It's not that we don't trust you, Melissa. It's the principle. You're strong. You've got this." And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not snapped, because snapping implies something loud and immediate, but shifted, slowly and deeply, like a floorboard warping under pressure you didn't realize was there until it creaked beneath your feet. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't remind them how I've never once asked for anything since college, how I paid off my own student loans while Jamie, my younger sister by 5 years, was gifted a debt-free education and an all-inclusive spring break every damn year. I just said, "Okay, thanks anyway," and hung up. The silence in my apartment after that call felt heavier than any no I'd ever heard. Exactly 7 days later, Jamie called me, absolutely breathless with excitement. I still remember how loud her voice sounded through the phone, like her joy was trying to suffocate me. "Oh my God, you will not believe what Mom and Dad did. They bought me a condo. A freaking condo. Downtown. All in cash." She was laughing like she'd won the lottery, and in a way, she had. I let her finish. I even said, "Wow, and that's amazing," and all the other polite, sisterly crap people expect. I didn't ask why. I didn't say a single word about the phone call from a week ago. I didn't even hang up angry. I just muted the phone for a moment, stared at the wall across from me, and blinked slow and hard, like trying to force reality back into focus. I guess some part of me always knew. Jamie has always been the soft one. The one who cried when her toast was too brown. The one who couldn't keep a job longer than 6 months, but still somehow landed softly every time. She didn't have to work harder, she just had to be lovable. I, on the other hand, was the resilient one, which, in family code, translates to, "We know you'll survive whatever we throw at you, so we don't worry as much." For days after the condo reveal, I said nothing. I went to work, came home, drank wine straight from the bottle once or twice, and stared at the ceiling wondering if maybe I was being too sensitive, if maybe they really didn't see the double standard. Maybe in their eyes, giving Jamie the condo wasn't a betrayal. Maybe to them it was helping the one who needed it most. But then again, when had I ever made it look like I didn't need anything? Just because I don't cry doesn't mean I'm not bleeding. What made it worse, what really sunk the knife in, wasn't the condo. It was what happened after. Mom called a few days later, chirpy as ever, asking what color couch I was going to get for the new apartment. "I hope you're getting something neutral. You always go too bold with colors, Melissa." I told her the lease fell through, that I couldn't secure it without a cosigner. She paused, just for a second, then said, "Well, maybe it just wasn't meant to be." That phrase. That goddamn phrase. The polite shrug of people who never had to wonder if the world was meant for them. And here's the kicker, I didn't explode. I didn't scream or call them out or write some dramatic Facebook post. No, I did what I always do. I recalculated. Found another apartment. Smaller. Further from the lake. But mine. No cosigner needed. Higher rent, less light, no herbs in the window. But mine. When I signed the lease, I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. Tired of clapping for myself in a room full of people who never once turned their heads when I walked in with news of my own. So yeah, I moved. Quietly. Without fanfare. I hired movers on TaskRabbit, carried the last few boxes myself, and sat on the floor that first night eating cold takeout from a paper bag, wondering if maybe being independent was just another word for being alone. But even then, even in that low, quiet, angry place, I knew something had changed. I didn't cry. I didn't call Jamie to congratulate her. I didn't send Mom a picture of my new apartment. I didn't ask Dad what he thought of the area. And when they texted, "Can't wait to see your place," I didn't answer. I just read it. Then I turned off my phone. Not out of spite, but because I didn't owe them a damn thing. And this silence, they'd taught me that too. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't scream. It lingers, seeps, and sinks so deep that by the time you notice it's there, it's already changed you. That's what it felt like waking up the next morning after Jamie's condo announcement. I lay in bed, staring at the cracks in my ceiling like they were trying to spell something out for me, some secret message I wasn't sharp enough to see. The sunlight came in through my old blinds in broken stripes, hitting the dusty dresser I'd bought from a thrift store 5 years ago. No stainless steel appliances, no marble countertops, no floor-to-ceiling windows. Just me, my morning breath, and a slow-building pressure in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. I didn't cry. That would have felt like giving in, like confirming what they probably already believed, that I was jealous, ungrateful, dramatic. That I couldn't just be happy for my sister. But it wasn't about the damn condo. It wasn't about granite countertops or who got what. It was about how clearly, undeniably, humiliatingly visible it all became in that moment, that no matter how hard I worked, how quietly I held my tongue, how many times I picked myself up without asking for help, I would always be the one left to figure things out on my own, while Jamie would always have a net waiting to catch her. I tried to go about my day like nothing had changed. Went to work, nodded through meetings, answered emails like my brain wasn't chewing on itself in the background. But the resentment had started boiling in slow motion, and it was spreading like a damn oil spill, coating every thought, every memory, until even the good ones started to feel like lies. That night, I sat at my desk with a glass of cheap red wine, scrolling through old photos on my phone, not because I wanted to reminisce, but because I needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy. That the evidence was there, always had been, just hidden in the corners of things I didn't want to see. There was the picture of Jamie's high school graduation, Mom beaming, Dad holding up a stupid handmade sign that said, "That's our girl." I remember standing there, taking the photo, the designated family photographer as always, no one offering to switch places so I could be in the frame too. My own graduation photo, from college, had been taken by a stranger I flagged down in the parking lot because my parents were stuck in traffic and missed the ceremony. They took me to Applebee's that night. Jamie got a 3-day weekend in Charleston with a spa reservation and matching mother-daughter bathrobes. But maybe that's not a fair comparison, right? Maybe I'm just remembering things the way I want to remember them, bitter, defensive, looking for proof where there is none. That thought, maybe I'm the problem, sat heavy on my chest for the rest of the evening. So I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called my mother. Not to confront her, not to accuse, but to ask the question I had never had the nerve to say out loud. Do you even realize you treat us differently? There was a pause, longer than I expected, filled with the sound of her sighing like she had just been handed one more thing she didn't have time for. She said, "Melissa, I don't want to have this conversation if it's going to be about blame." Blame? I wasn't even angry, not yet, anyway. I just wanted to understand. I said, "I needed you to co-sign a lease, not take out a loan. I wasn't asking for money, Mom. Just trust. Just support. A little gesture to show you believed in me." She answered, in the most matter-of-fact voice imaginable, "Jamie needs more help than you. She always has. You're different. You figure things out." You don't fall apart. And there it was. The golden explanation. The way they sleep at night. Because I don't fall apart, they think I don't break. That night, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. When I was in 10th grade, I got into a car accident. Nothing major, just a fender bender in the school parking lot. I came home, shaken and panicked, expecting some kind of emotional rescue. Instead, my dad gave me a long lecture about being responsible, while Mom barely looked up from the magazine she was reading. Jamie, 2 years later, wrecked my mom's SUV backing out of the driveway and ended up in tears. They bought her a milkshake on the way back from the mechanic and told her accidents happen. These things sound petty when you list them out. Small. Isolated. But when they happen again and again, they stop being isolated. They become a pattern. A quiet message written into every moment: you're strong. She's fragile. You'll manage. She won't. So we help her. But here's the truth: strength is not the absence of need. And being strong doesn't mean I didn't deserve to be comforted, to be cared for, to be prioritized once in a while. The worst part wasn't the favoritism. It was the gaslighting. The subtle way they made me feel like it was all in my head, like I was keeping score in a game they swore didn't exist. And I started to wonder how many other people feel this way. How many sons and daughters spend their lives swallowing injustice in their own homes because calling it out makes you look bitter, petty, like a sore loser in the emotional Olympics. I was 38 years old, had lived in 3 cities, managed 2 careers, put myself through night school to get a better job, and still I was stuck trying to prove to my parents that I deserved the same love they gave away so freely to someone else. And not because I wanted a condo, but because I wanted to matter. In the days that followed, I didn't bring it up again. I didn't respond to Jamie's texts about how excited she was to decorate her space, or how she was already looking for a cleaner who does floors. She lived 15 minutes from me now, but it may as well have been another planet. She didn't offer to help me move. Didn't ask if I needed anything. Just sent me a picture of her new marble kitchen island and said, "We're both so lucky, huh?" I sat with that message for a long time. Wondered if maybe this was the moment I finally told her the truth. But then again, what good would it do? Jamie doesn't see it. She never has. She's always believed she's earned everything she's been handed because no one ever told her otherwise. And maybe that's not her fault. But it's not mine either. So I started planning my next move. Not out of revenge, but out of clarity. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream or demand an apology. Sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to stop showing up where you were never seen in the first place. And that's exactly what I decided to do. Quietly. Deliberately. Without drama. I would take my space. Build my peace. And when the time came, when they inevitably asked why I was drifting away, I would look them dead in the eye and say, "Isn't that what family's for?" There's a particular kind of peace that comes not from healing, but from finally running out of energy to care, from reaching a point where the exhaustion outweighs the ache, and silence becomes easier than explanation. After that call with my mother and the fake laughing, airheaded texts from Jamie about backsplash tile colors and cabinet pulls, I stopped pretending that anything made sense. Stopped making excuses for people who had made a lifetime habit of handing me less and expecting me to be grateful just because they didn't give me nothing at all. I moved into my apartment alone, just like every other damn thing I've done in my adult life, and not one of them showed up to help carry a box or even bring me a cheap bottle of wine as a gesture, nothing, not even a card. And I didn't ask. That's the sickest part of all, I didn't expect it. Because at some point, low expectations just turns into acceptance, and you stop being disappointed because you finally accepted you were never going to be chosen anyway. The apartment wasn't the dream one by the lake. It didn't have the wide windows or the sun-drenched walls I had imagined when I first started searching. This place was smaller, older, and had a weird smell in the hallway that I couldn't quite pin down, like leftover soup and old carpet. But it was mine. No strings. No signatures, but my own. No one could say they gave it to me or that I owed them a thank you card. I signed the lease, paid the deposits, arranged the movers, and showed up on move-in day wearing the same gray hoodie I wore in college when I used to study until 2 in the morning with ramen noodles and coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. The movers were polite but clearly rushed, and by the time everything was unloaded, my body ached like I'd been hit by a bus. Still, no one called. No one checked in. My phone stayed silent, except for a work notification and a promotional text from my cell phone provider offering me $5 off my next bill. And that was the most support I got that day. I ordered Chinese food, sat cross-legged on the floor because my couch wasn't assembled yet, and watched the walls close in around me like I had built them myself, brick by invisible brick. Every layer made of swallowed words and tight-lipped nods and one-sided phone calls that left me lonelier than silence. I had this moment, sitting there with a lukewarm dumpling between my fingers, where I realized how completely done I was, not in a dramatic, tear-soaked, wine-glass-shattering kind of way, but in a calm, bone-deep, unmoving sort of way. I was done chasing their approval, done trying to decode their selective generosity, done measuring my worth against whatever scale they used to justify giving Jamie everything while handing me nothing but empty encouragement and guilt. So when Mom texted me 2 days later asking when the housewarming party would be, because apparently she had assumed I'd be inviting them, I didn't lie, I didn't stall, and I sure as hell didn't invite them. I just typed back, "It already happened last weekend." It was small. That was it. No emoji. No, maybe next time. Just the truth. The truth dressed in indifference, the same way they had wrapped their decisions about me for the last 30 years. A few hours later, Jamie sent me a message, and this one I could hear in her voice before I even opened it, overconfident, dismissive, with that underlying tone of someone who had never really had to fight for anything and therefore assumed anyone who didn't get what they wanted was either incompetent or immature. Her message said, "Are you seriously punishing Mom and Dad because you didn't get a condo? Grow up." Just those words. No pretense. No attempt at empathy. Just that sharp, juvenile assumption that everything I did must be about envy, that I must be counting Jamie's blessings instead of grieving my own absence from the table. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have 1,000 things to say, believe me, I did, but because I knew better now. I knew that no matter how many ways I explained it, they would only ever hear what fit the version of me they'd already written in their heads. Bitter, dramatic, difficult, too proud to accept help and too resentful when she didn't get it. And frankly, I didn't owe them an education on emotional neglect, not when they'd been the textbook authors of it my entire life. That night, I started deleting things. Not out of spite, but for my own sanity. I took Mom off my emergency contact form at work. I removed the family group chat from my favorites list. I unfollowed Jamie on social media because I didn't need to see her smiling in front of her marble kitchen island with captions like, "Feeling so blessed," when the only thing she'd ever been was catered to. I even took the birthday reminder off my calendar because pretending to care enough to send a text felt like one more drop of dignity I couldn't afford to spill. And it felt good. Not triumphant, not joyful, but clean. Like pulling out a splinter that had been festering for years and finally realizing the ache had become part of your body without you even noticing. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. I didn't answer their calls that week. I didn't reply to the follow-up text Mom sent saying, "We just wanted to celebrate your new place." I didn't explain why I didn't tell them about the move-in day, or the takeout, or how I had to borrow a screwdriver from a neighbor to assemble my bed frame at midnight. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't punishing them. I was simply giving them what they'd always given me. Nothing. It's funny how people only start to question your character when you finally stop bending over backward to please them. Suddenly, when you stop answering the phone or showing up with a smile glued to your face, you're not just busy or going through something, you're bitter, you're selfish, or worse, you're cruel. That was the narrative slowly building around me after I chose silence over performance, after I decided that preserving my own mental peace was worth more than preserving the illusion that everything between us was fine. And as that version of me, the difficult daughter, the jealous sister, the one who can't just let things go, started spreading quietly among the people who once claimed to know me best, I found myself oddly unbothered. Because maybe, just maybe, Letting them believe I was the villain gave me the freedom to finally stop apologizing for the damage they never even acknowledged. I hadn't spoken to Jamie since that last text. I hadn't returned my parents' calls in over a week. The missed call count had risen steadily, never frantic, never desperate, just consistent, like clockwork, as if they were ticking boxes on a moral checklist rather than genuinely trying to reconnect. Called Melissa. Check. She didn't answer again. Oh well. And I knew, with painful clarity, that the conversations behind those calls probably sounded something like, "She's being dramatic again," or "She always takes everything so personally," or my personal favorite, "We've done nothing but love her." And this is the thanks we get. I wasn't playing games. I wasn't staging a silent protest or waiting for them to beg for forgiveness. I just no longer saw the value in engaging people who only saw me clearly when I was performing the role they assigned me. For years, I was the reliable one, the self-sufficient daughter who never needed hand-holding, who made things work without complaint. They called me strong, but that strength was never rewarded, only used. I became the one who didn't need much, and in return, I got exactly that, not much. And when I dared to step out of that mold, when I asked for something simple, something symbolic, and was denied, not out of inability, but out of choice, it became clear that strength, in their eyes, wasn't admirable. It was convenient. I started rebuilding my life slowly and deliberately, surrounding myself not with people who shared my blood, but with those who offered me what I had longed for most: presence without obligation, support without strings, connection without comparison. My neighbor, Veronica, a sharp-tongued 50-something woman with a wicked sense of humor and a wine rack that could survive the apocalypse, became my accidental confidant. We met one night when she heard me dragging a dresser up the stairs alone and insisted on helping, despite wearing flip-flops and nursing a gimpy knee from a bad fall years ago. That kind of gesture, a stranger seeing my struggle and responding with kindness instead of critique, hit harder than I expected. It made me realize how starved I was for basic, uncomplicated decency. At work, I started saying no more often, stopped volunteering for tasks that weren't mine to carry, stopped cushioning my emails with apologetic language designed to make people feel comfortable about using me. It was liberating. Strange, but liberating. I began to see how deeply the patterns from my family had infected every corner of my life, how I had become so accustomed to shrinking myself to avoid conflict, to staying useful so I wouldn't be discarded, to keeping quiet so I wouldn't be labeled difficult. But now, difficult didn't sound like an insult, it sounded like an escape. My phone remained silent most days. The holidays were approaching, and the invitations, predictably, began to arrive. Jamie sent a mass group message about Thanksgiving at the condo. I was included, of course, never outright excluded, because that would be too obvious, too messy, but the tone was clear: "We'll be there at 4, bring a dish, hope you can make it." Not a personal note. Not a real olive branch. Just a shallow gesture disguised as family unity. I ignored it. The day before Thanksgiving, my mother called 3 times in a row. I didn't pick up. Then, just after noon on Thanksgiving Day, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jamie, and I should have known something was off when I saw her name pop up. I answered, mostly out of morbid curiosity. The first thing I heard was background noise, dishes clinking, laughter, muffled voices. Then Jamie's voice came through, too chipper, too forced. "Hey," she said, "you busy?" I didn't respond. "Good, because you're on speaker," she continued, like it was some kind of inside joke. And then, loud enough for everyone to hear, she added, "Tell everyone why you hate Mom and Dad." For a second, I was too stunned to speak. Not angry, just stunned, like being pushed into cold water without warning. I could hear my mother's awkward chuckle in the background, my father's low cough, and a few others murmuring, clearly confused. I let the silence stretch, because I knew Jamie hated that more than yelling. I imagined them all gathered around the condo's gleaming kitchen island, wine glasses in hand, trying to pretend this wasn't uncomfortable. And I pictured myself on the outside, as always, but this time, I wasn't aching to be let in. I was observing, detached, amused even, because what kind of family stages an ambush on a holiday and calls it reconciliation? Eventually, I said, "You want a performance, Jamie?" "Sorry, I'm fresh out." Then I hung up. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't cry. I went back to roasting sweet potatoes in my tiny oven, my apartment filled with the warm, savory smell of thyme and garlic, and I realized something I probably should have learned years ago. When you stop performing, you find out who your audience really is. The next morning, I posted a photo of my dinner table, just a modest setup with 3 plates, some candles, and a bottle of wine. I captioned it simply, "Grateful for chosen family." No names. No explanations. No jabs. Just a quiet declaration that I was done being the loyal understudy in a play that never made room for me on stage. If they wanted to call that bitterness, so be it. If they wanted to call it revenge, fine. Let them believe I was the villain. Because I'd rather be misunderstood and free than understood and controlled. There's a moment in every person's life, though not everyone has the clarity to notice it when it arrives, where a choice must be made, not about career, or money, or even love, but about dignity, about self-respect, about the quiet but profound decision to stop watering a tree that never bore you fruit, no matter how many times people insisted it was just going through a dry season. That moment came for me not during a screaming match or some grand confrontation, but on a rainy Sunday evening, about 2 weeks after the Thanksgiving fiasco, when I sat on my couch, finally assembled, finally stable, staring out my window at the streetlights flickering through the rain, and I realized with a steady, almost soothing certainty that I would not be picking up the phone ever again just because guilt had dialed my number. It had been quiet since the speakerphone stunt, eerily quiet. In that way, families sometimes go quiet not out of remorse, but out of strategic retreat, like they're regrouping, waiting for you to make the next move, to extend the olive branch, to restore the balance they disrupted without ever acknowledging they were the ones who did the shaking. I had no intention of doing that. I had spent the better part of my adult life being the bridge builder, the peacekeeper, the one who took the high road so often I practically had a toll pass, and I was exhausted, not just from the effort of being endlessly graceful, but from the gnawing emptiness that comes from always showing up for people who never once turned around to make sure you hadn't fallen behind. The invitations to Christmas came in next, first in the form of a group email, polite, vague, transactional, and then, when I didn't respond, in a handwritten card from my mother, which I found oddly offensive, like a last-ditch effort to seem thoughtful without actually being thoughtful. The card said things like, "Family is forever, and we may not always agree, but love remains," which sounded less like sentiment and more like a political slogan from someone trying to win an election after tanking the economy. There was no apology. Not a word about the lease, the condo, the speakerphone humiliation, or even the months of growing distance. Just surface-level platitudes scrawled in her handwriting, the same one she used on birthday cards and grocery lists, trying to pass off nostalgia as atonement. I didn't go to Christmas. Instead, I spent it with my neighbor Veronica, her cousin Bill, and another woman from our building named Carmen, who brought homemade flan and told stories that made all of us laugh until our stomachs hurt. We drank too much wine, listened to jazz records on Veronica's old turntable, and exchanged small, thoughtful gifts that reflected how well we'd come to know one another in such a short time. It was warm, uncomplicated, real. And at some point, somewhere between dessert and our 3rd bottle of red, I felt this swell of unexpected emotion, not grief, not regret, but something more complex, more bittersweet. Because as much as I loved this makeshift table of misfits and late bloomers, I couldn't ignore the quiet ache of what should have been. That somewhere out there, my family was probably sitting around a larger, fancier table, toasting to another year, pretending everything was fine, maybe even mentioning my name with a sigh and a shake of the head, painting me as the one who chose distance over healing, when in reality, I chose myself over a lifetime of feeling like a burden in my own damn home. A few days later, I received a voicemail from my father, and though my first instinct was to delete it without listening, something in his voice, older now, more tired than I remembered, made me pause. He said, "I don't know what we did that was so wrong, but I guess you've made up your mind. Just know we'll always be here when you're ready." And there it was again, That quiet, insidious refusal to acknowledge anything real, wrapped in the language of love, but so hollow it echoed. He didn't know what they did wrong? After everything? After the lease, the condo, the years of second place, the constant reminders that love in our family came with terms and conditions, and only some of us got the premium package, that voicemail wasn't an olive branch. It was a baited hook. And I was done biting. I deleted it. Then, in the new year, I threw a real housewarming party, not the fake one I pretended had already happened when they first asked, but a real gathering with people who had seen me in the trenches, people who had offered their hands without asking for something in return. People who knew me not as the strong one or the jealous daughter, but as Melissa, the woman who made killer roasted potatoes, who couldn't keep a plant alive if her life depended on it, who danced like a maniac when old. Mariah Carey songs came on, and who, finally, had stopped asking her parents to see her when they never really looked. The apartment glowed that night, not from expensive lighting fixtures or high-end decor, but from laughter, warmth, and the kind of energy that can't be faked or forced. There were toasts, small and silly, and at one point someone asked, half-jokingly, if my family had made peace with my disappearance. I just smiled and said, let's just say, I think they finally got the message. Because they had. Whether they understood it or not, whether they ever admitted it or not, they had received the clearest message I had ever given them, not through angry words or tearful breakdowns, but through absence, through silence, through the simple act of building something beautiful without inviting them to see it. But perhaps the most surreal moment came an hour into the party, when there was a knock at the door that no one was expecting. It was my father. He wasn't holding a gift or a bottle of wine. He wasn't smiling or even pretending to. He just stood there in the hallway, looking strangely out of place in his stiff coat, like a man who had walked into a story he no longer recognized. We stared at each other for a long moment, neither of us saying anything, the hum of conversation and music behind me forming a strange, protective barrier between us. And then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I didn't invite him in. I didn't yell or slam the door. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and gently, quietly closed the door. Because here's the thing I've come to understand, the truth I carried with me through every unreturned call, every unanswered invitation, every skipped holiday and quiet dinner alone. Forgiveness does not always mean reunion. Sometimes it means release. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, for your peace, for the life you're building brick by painstaking brick, is to stop asking people who never clapped for you to attend your victories. I didn't need applause from people who only ever showed up when it suited them. Because who you clap for says everything. And I finally chose to clap for myself.